Now it's time for Call the Floor with Elliott Schechter.
Elliott Schechter is the poker room manager for Rivers Casino in Schenectady, New York. He joins us each week to say how he would rule on situations that come up in your games, and he's with me again this week. Elliott, how the heck are you?
Things are great, Joe. I'm doing very well. It's been a good week. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's the weather's been super hot, and then we got a big rainstorm that came in that just shut out the power, which isn't always a bad thing. As long as it's not like a super extended period of time, I can take some quietness for a while.
As long as it doesn't get too warm.
Yeah. But other than that, things have been good. Has it been warm up there too?
Yes. It certainly has. It's been peaking into the upper 80s, but it's we've gotten some rain. It's cooled it off a little. It's not too bad.
Good deal. We had a super interesting call the floor sent in by Simon Mendez this week. And I particularly enjoyed it because it wasn't Hold'em. It was so this one comes from a 2-5 PLO cash game, which I always enjoy just getting out of that box a little bit. But in this particular case, it says on the flop, player A asked the dealer how much the pot is, and the dealer answers 95. Player A then cuts out $95 in chips and slides them in front of him. After this action, the dealer corrected himself and announced, "Sorry, pot is $120. Player A now wants to take his bet back, and the floor was called. Now, I did reach out to Simon to get clarification on this because it wasn't that he wanted to take his bet back. It was that he wanted to take it back and put out the 120, which is, I think, is important.
That's exceptionally important, yes.
Then Simon asks the question, if the player didn't say pot, and in this case he didn't, should they be allowed to change their bet? Then I have a follow-up question to that, because in a game that's not pot limit, if I was to ask the dealer what the pot is, they can spread it out, but they're not going to tell me what's in the pot. So why would that be different in this case? I mean, wouldn't it still be the player's responsibility?
Well, there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm glad we brought this one up. Thank you for sending in a non-Texas Hold'em submission. We appreciate it. Still waiting for the 7-card stud one, so you guys out there playing stud, send those submissions in and invite me to the game. So let's talk about the actual situation first, then get to the conceptual questions. He asked how much the pot was. The dealer gave him a number. He very silently cuts out the number and bets it. Well, the first and basic rule is one bet per action, one bet per turn, one action per turn. Any different way you want to describe it, it's still the same thing. When it's your turn, you have one chance to make a play. When you don't make your intentions clear, the decisions don't go your way. That is the overriding principle. Had the player very simply said, "I bet the pot," and then the dealer catches the mistake and say, "Oh no, the pot is actually 120, the bet is corrected up. He put out chips. He bet. I mean, in pot limit, it's very, very common to ask how much the pot is, and for the player to bet less than the pot. Sometimes the player doesn't need to bet the whole pot. Sometimes the player doesn't intend to. In pot limit, it's good information to have, and it's important. And now we'll segue into the conceptual questions. Why are we allowed to announce the pot in pot limit and not in any other game? Well, very simply. Unlike fixed limit, where we know the betting amount for every single action, and in no limit, you can pretty much bet whatever you've got up to what you have in front of you anytime you want. In pot limit, the limit fluctuates based on the actual size of the pot, giving us the very well-named pot limit. So obviously, with enough bets and enough varying sizes of bets, calculating the pot can be complicated. And at that point, it becomes at least a little unfair on the players to absolutely be able to calculate the pot on their own every single time they make a bet. And if we didn't have the dealer step in and announce the amount of the pot and set that limit, enforcing the actual pot limit on a pot limit game would be next to impossible. And the overbetting would run rampant, basically turning into a no limit game and changing the nature of the game. Pot limit being very, very skillful and complicated compared to the other games. Taking the pot limit equation out of the pot limit definitely changes the game for the worse and almost negates it. So it's important in pot limit games for the dealer to be able to announce the amount of the pot on demand.
Yeah. I mean, I asked the question, but I can imagine where it would just incredibly slow down the game if you're just constantly going, oh, let's see, that's
Right.
such
People
and
would
such
be
amount.
taking off their shoes and counting all the way down to the toes all of the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's important for the dealer to be able to give you the right number. It's also important to make your intentions clear. Had the player who asked how much the pot was not decided to go silent and instead announced, okay, I bet the pot. You're taken care of. You've protected your hand. You've protected your bet. You've made your intentions clear. You've done everything that we as operators and as players require of, or at least request of players. And in this case, he didn't. The bet speaks for itself is a pretty important fundamental rule of the game. He cut out 95 and bet it out there. That bet speaks for itself regardless of what the pot was. There's a lot of situations where people aren't going to bet the whole pot. It's good to know. I mean, third pot, half pot, 2/3 pot bets are very common. So again, I appreciate the fact that the dealer screwed up. The players are still playing the game. I feel badly the dealer screwed up. The dealer should know how to calculate the pot in a pot limit game. Yeah, that's kind of important. That being said, the players are still playing the game.
Right.
Players got to be able to pay attention. And at 2-5 already, generally, I mean, that's already the second or third step up in the PLO universe. Generally, a lot of games are 1-2-5 to come in, 1-3-5 to come in, 2-2, 2-3, that range. Those are the entry games for PLO, generally. 2-5 is what is considered the mid-stakes already. If you go to a 2-5 game in a big room or in a medium-sized room, 15 or more tables, and you're playing 2-5 PLO, sitting 8 or 9-handed, hopefully 8, 4 of the 8, 5 of the 8, 6 of the 8 are going to be able to calculate the pot every single time and are pretty much, well, sadly, asking the dealer just to be pains in the butt and kneel the dealer to make sure they're paying attention, which I see the good effect. There is a bright side. Keeping the dealer on their toes keeps the dealer actively involved in dealing a pot limit game, which is very important. So again, not speaking when it's your turn is not good. And for some reason, it's incredibly common amongst Omaha players. When they're playing high-low, the typical Omaha high-low player doesn't be quiet until it's his turn to show his cards at showdown, and then you can't get a word out of him edgewise. Will not speak a word. Quiet as a church mouse is the better expression. And PLO players are almost the same way. For some reason, it occurred to him to ask how much the pot was, and then it occurred to him to not say a word when he bet. That makes no sense. When I played the game, I played in a courteous manner, in a respectful manner, and in a way that protects both my hand and the game. When I make a bet, I clearly state the amount I'm betting. When I'm raising, I clearly state the word raise. It's okay to do these things. And when you don't, when your intentions are not 100% clear, you will fall to the whims of the rules. And as I've stated many times and will continue to state, it's very important for everybody to know. When we are brought to the table to make a decision, we will make the fairest, most conservative possible decision we can that is within the rules and maintains the fairness and integrity of the game.
Right. So, I mean, essentially, it is still the player's responsibility to know, like you said, the dealer can announce what the pot is, but it's still the player's responsibility to know what the pot is mostly and put that amount. So if the dealer says the wrong amount and you put out that amount, then it's still going to stick unless it's a higher amount.
Exactly. And again, this is player responsibility is the key here. It's not just the player's responsibility to know how much. It's the player's responsibility to make it clear what their intentions are. That is even as important, if not more important. All the player had to do here was state, "I bet the pot," and
right.
Obviously the dealer stepped in with the correct amount before the next player acted, so there was no action yet. Had he announced, "I bet the pot," and placed 95, and then the dealer said, "Wait a minute, there's 120 here," we're correcting that up. Your intention was to bet the pot. The pot is 120. Nobody has acted. You're betting that amount, period.
Right.
So again, not only is it your responsibility to pay attention to the game around you and to know how much is in the pot, which is a big part of No Limit Hold'em, and precisely the reason the amount of the pot is not announced in No Limit Hold'em. It's the player's game. The player's got to pay attention. People are putting in action all around the table. It's your job to follow it. If you don't want to follow it, don't. Nobody's making you do it. But it's still, ultimately the player's responsibility. It's your responsibility as the player to follow the game and to know what's happening. The player is there to make change and make the game go faster and make the game more enjoyable. And, of course, get the rate for us operators. And we appreciate that. Thank you, dealers. Yeah, it's the player's game. The players are playing each other. They've got to pay attention. They've got to protect their hands, their bets, the game. It's very important. Player responsibility is huge. When players don't want to pay attention, when they want to be spoon-fed the game, when they just want to rely on other people and the dealer for everything, it bogs the game down. It certainly makes it less fun. It makes the dealer work way too hard and makes it easy for everybody else to shoot an angle or get one over. If the dealer has to invest way too much of their time on any one player, that's time they obviously can't invest in the rest of the people at the table, and something's going to go wrong. So it's not fair to everybody else.
Right. That makes sense too. Well, Simon, I hope that clears things up. I do appreciate you sending in a non-Hold'em game, and I'll be looking for the stud hands next.
Yep. All you guys out there, there's got to be enough to at least have one full table. So
yeah.
Let us know.
All right, Elliott, I really appreciate you doing this, and we'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Quite welcome. Glad to do it. Talk to you soon.